Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. If you haven't already done so, please make sure the volume of this podcast is set perfectly to your listening enjoyment. Please take your seat, whether that's on the treadmill, car, sofa, or bed, and buckle in for the last trip. My name is Jamie Beebe, and I'll be your tour guide, recreating someone's last days in paradise. On behalf of myself and everyone behind the scenes, please enjoy the Last Trip podcast. And because nobody likes a long flight to get to where they want to be, let's prepare for takeoff. In November 2024, what started as a fun night out in the party town of Vang Vieng turned into a horrifying nightmare. 6 tourists from around the world never woke up. Others barely escaped with their lives. At first, it seemed like a tragic accident, a case of tainted alcohol poisoning unsuspecting travelers in Laos. But as the details emerged, the story took a darker turn. Why were only tourists affected? Why did local authorities move so quickly to shut down the investigation? And could this have been something far more sinister than a simple mistake? Was this mass poisoning the result of greed, negligence, or something more deliberate? We're diving into the chilling case of the Laos Methanol Poisonings, where a fun night out turned fatal, and the truth might still be buried. Vang Vieng, Laos is a town known for its breathtaking limestone karsts, the Nam Song River, and a reputation as a backpacker's dream. A place where adventure seekers float down the river in inner tubes, sip cheap cocktails, and hop between riverside bars. Vang Vieng in the 1980s and early 1990s was a world away from what it would become. Tucked away in the heart of Laos, it was a small rural town with just a few guest houses catering to the occasional intrepid traveler, the ones who strayed from the well-trodden backpacker routes of Thailand and Vietnam. The village had little in the way of infrastructure. It was dirt roads, wooden stilt houses, and local markets selling fresh produce and handmade crafts. And it wasn't easy to get there in those days. The journey from Vientiane took hours on bumpy, dusty roads winding through mountains and valleys. But those who made the trip found a place of peace and untouched beauty. The Nam Song River was used by locals for fishing and transport, with beautiful, serene caves that were places of spiritual significance and wartime refuge during the turbulent years of the Vietnam War. The village attracted a different type of traveler: nature lovers, adventurers, and cultural explorers. They came to hike through the limestone mountains, explore hidden caves, and kayak gently down the river. Days were spent cycling through rice fields, visiting remote villages, and learning about the lives of the local Hmong and Lao people. Some travelers came seeking a deeper connection to the land. Meditation retreats and yoga classes were held in simple bamboo huts with the sounds of birds and flowing water. The guest houses that existed catered to travelers looking for solitude rather than nightlife. Electricity was unreliable and Wi-Fi was unheard of. Meals were simple: sticky rice, grilled fish, vegetables grown in nearby fields. But behind the laid-back vibes, things were about to heat up, giving Vang Vieng a much darker history. Because just a few decades ago, this town was infamous for deadly tubing accidents, drug-fueled parties, and a tourism industry that, at times, thrived on reckless abandon. In the late 1990s, Laos began opening up to more tourism. Backpackers traveling through Southeast Asia on the Banana Pancake Trail, which was a loosely defined route connecting popular budget travel destinations, they started trickling into Vang Vieng. People heard about the stunning untouched village, and they wanted an alternative to the increasingly crowded beaches of Thailand. With more visitors came the demand for places to stay, places to eat, and things to do. The locals saw the potential, so guest houses turned into hostels, cafes popped up, and the changes began. In the early 2000s, Vang Vieng emerged as a must-visit spot on Southeast Asia's backpacker circuit. Drawn by its natural beauty and the promise of adventure, travelers from around the globe flocked to this once sleepy town. But it wasn't just the scenery that captivated them. The Nam Song River became the epicenter of activity. Enterprising locals introduced tubing, a seemingly innocent pastime where visitors would float down the river on inner tubes. But as the years progressed, things started to change. Bars popped up along the riverbanks, each trying to get the attention of the tubers. The alcohol was cheap, the music was loud, and there were various attractions added, like rope swings and zip lines. They offered different potent cocktails, often served in buckets, and the allure of free shots to anyone who floated by. But it didn't stop with just alcohol. Drugs became readily available. Magic mushrooms, opium, and other substances were openly sold and consumed. The combination of fast-flowing water, intoxication, and lack of safety measures set the stage for disaster. As the party scene spiraled out of control, accidents became alarmingly frequent. There were constant reports of drownings and injuries, but also the environmental impact was significant. In 2011, Vang Vieng's small hospital reported 27 foreigner deaths, most of them under the age of 25. And doctors believed there were many more, as patients with more serious injuries were often transferred to Vientiane. But why so many deaths? Adding alcohol and drugs while jumping into waters that concealed shallow, rocky riverbeds, along with the absence of safety regulations, was a major part of the problem. The mounting death toll and international media attention forced the Laotian government to step up. In 2012, authorities shut down numerous riverside bars, clamped down on the open sale of drugs, and imposed stricter regulations on river activities. Their goal was to rebrand Vang Vieng as an ecotourism and adventure travel hub, a more responsible tourist destination. And for a while, it seemed the town turned a corner. Things around the river quieted down, and the focus shifted back to appreciating the natural beauty of the area. But in November 2024, that dark past crept back in when a group of travelers unknowingly took their last drink.
Hi everyone, we are the hosts of Like Mother Like Murder, a true crime momcast.
You heard that right. We are a momcast, which is our unique twist in the true crime world.
What sets us aside is that our content is mainly mom related, from missing moms to murdered moms,
To moms who committed the crime, survivors, and more.
We are getting started on our third season with over 100 episodes that you guys can go and binge. Hi, I'm Rachel.
And I'm Heather. We drop new episodes every Tuesday wherever you get your podcasts at Like Mother,
Like Murder.
When we talk about true crime, we often focus on clear-cut villains, like murderers, kidnappers, and serial killers. But sometimes, the most terrifying crimes aren't the ones committed in the shadows. They happen in plain sight. A simple drink at the bar, a shared toast between new friends, a night that starts with excitement and ends in tragedy. This isn't just a story about a deadly accident or foul play. It's about 6 travelers, 6 people with dreams, lives, with families waiting for them to come home, who all took their last trip to a backpacker's paradise in Laos. They didn't know that paradise had a dark side, and they never saw it coming. The headlines called it a tragedy. 6 tourists die after drinking tainted alcohol in Laos. A few lines, a brief mention of names. But these aren't just names. They were people. They had stories, dreams, reasons for being in that hostel that night. They didn't go to Laos to die. They went for adventure, for freedom, for something bigger than the lives they left behind. Simone White was 28 years old, a brilliant young lawyer from the UK, with a sharp mind and an even sharper sense of adventure. And she wasn't just traveling, she was seeking. Southeast Asia wasn't just a getaway. It was an escape from the rigid world of courtrooms and contracts. She wanted to immerse herself in cultures, lose herself in the unknown, push the limits of what she knew. She wasn't reckless, but she wasn't afraid either. Especially with her best friend Bethany, a healthcare worker also from the UK, joining her trip of a lifetime. Friends described Simone as confident, curious, someone who never turned down a new experience. And that's exactly what she was doing that night, saying yes to one more drink, one more story, one more memory. The last message her mother, Sue White, ever received from her was full of excitement, saying, "I'm having the best time. It's an absolute fantastic holiday." Days later, she was gone. Bianca Jones and Holly Bowles were best friends. Two girls from Melbourne, barely out of their teens, on their first big adventure together. Bianca was only 19, wide-eyed and eager to experience the world, and Holly was just as hungry for the unknown. They mapped out their route carefully. Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos. Vang Vieng was supposed to be just another stop, one of those must-see places for young travelers. They were full of energy, the kind of people who made friends wherever they went. That night at Nana Backpacker Hostel, they were doing what every backpacker does, celebrating the freedom of the road, drinking with new friends, and soaking in the experience. They had no idea their dream trip would end that night. James Hudson didn't fit the usual backpacker mold. At 57, he wasn't a fresh-faced traveler on a gap year. He was a seasoned adventurer, an American tourist who had likely seen more of the world than most of the kids drinking at that hostel bar. Maybe that's what drew him to Vang Vieng, the nostalgia of a place that reminded him of his younger days. Or maybe just the thrill of one more story to tell. James had survived adventures before. He had taken risks, walked through unfamiliar streets, trusted strangers in places he couldn't pronounce. But nothing could have prepared him for the drink that would take his life. Anne-Sophie Orko Koyman and Freya Venervald Sorensen were 21 and 22 years old, two Danish girls who had their whole lives ahead of them. They had been traveling together, moving from one country to the next, collecting memories like postcards. They had dreams that stretched far beyond the borders of their home country. They weren't just seeing the world, they were becoming part of it. That night at Nana Backpacker Hostel, their paths crossed with the others. They drank, they laughed, they lived in the moment. And then one by one, they fell. How did a night of celebration turn into a nightmare? To understand what really happened, we need to take a closer look at the place where it all unfolded. The Nana Backpacker Hostel. They were thousands of miles from home, surrounded by strangers who felt like instant friends. The air was thick with music, the glow of neon lights flickered off half-empty cocktail buckets, and the night felt endless. This is the magic of backpacking, the feeling that you belong anywhere, that nothing bad can happen when you're young and free. And in Vang Vieng, there was one place that embodied that spirit more than anywhere else. Nana Backpacker Hostel, a place where adventure seekers came together, where nights blurred into mornings, and the party never really stopped. But beneath the carefree surface, Nana Backpacker was holding a secret that would eventually become the setting for an unthinkable tragedy. The exact founding date of Nana Backpacker remains unclear, but by the late 2010s, it had cemented itself as a cornerstone of Vang Vieng's vibrant backpacker scene. They catered to the wave of young travelers drawn to the town's natural beauty and the growing party culture. Nana Backpacker wasn't just a place to sleep. It was an experience. With its budget-friendly dorms, lively atmosphere, and the promise of non-stop fun, it quickly became a must-visit for anyone looking to let loose in Laos. Online reviews painted a picture of the hostel's appeal. There was a swimming pool right at the entrance, a bar offering free drinks from 7 to 9 p.m., and a communal space buzzing with music, conversation, and the energy of travelers from all over the world. For most guests, it was exactly what they were looking for. The hostel had almost exclusively 5-star ratings. One glowing review left on TripAdvisor just a month before the tragedy in October 2024 read, "I never leave reviews. Best hostel I've ever stayed at. Papa, who owns the hostel, is an absolute pool shark. He plays with one hand and beats everyone. He lets you in sometimes. If you beat him, you get a free beer. Would recommend this place to anyone visiting Vang Vieng. Excellent atmosphere at all times. But if you've ever booked a place, you know the rule. Always read the bad reviews first. There were the usual complaints: dirty beds, stained sheets, bugs in the rooms, a murky pool, bad Wi-Fi, and the expected noise from a party hostel. But some negative reviews pointed to more concerning issues, ones that, in hindsight, seem eerily foreboding. Several guests warned about safety concerns and staff behavior. 2 red flags that should never be ignored. First, there were no keys or key cards for the dorm rooms, meaning anyone could walk in at any time. One guest in their review wrote, "This is the one place I did not feel safe or comfortable staying in. I have stayed in many other party hostels, with staff caring more about your money than you having a good time or even your basic safety. If you have any respect for yourself, ethical traveling, the stunning Vang Vieng, or the wonderful people of Laos, go stay elsewhere. The way this place is run is a scourge to Vang Vieng." Then there were the staff complaints. In August 2023, a traveler named Ellie left a chilling review. To start with, the staff are extremely uninviting and rude upon arrival. One staff member made multiple comments which made us feel very uncomfortable. At around 9:30, we had a knock at the door. We opened it, and there were 2 staff members, cleaners, stood there, but they said nothing. We closed the door and got back into bed. Then they opened the door and filmed us. Other complaints described the staff as slow, unprofessional, and outright hostile. And then there was one review that now reads like a warning no one heeded. Reese, a traveler from the UK, stayed at Nana Backpacker in January 2020. He titled his 1-star review simply, "Avoid." And in it he wrote, "Checked in at reception to find there's no key for dorms. Rooms are small and not clean. I understand it's a party hostel, but we are all human and still need a high standard of cleanliness. Free bar between 7 to 9 p.m. served by the rudest bar staff possible. No ice or mixer unless you pay. You get vodka or whiskey. Next day, you'll probably be sick like everyone else in the toilet, or you might not make it there. Cheap. Sent my clothes to be washed and come back with double. Stuff not belonging to me. So count your items because I'm not sure I got all mine back. Finally, my back is full of bedbug bites. Watching the chef cooking through an open kitchen. If your food falls on the floor, it'll be thrown back in the pan. I'm traveling and stayed in a number of hostels. This one is to be avoided. Oh yes, last but not least, you won't be able to see the bottom of the pool. Not one person was swimming in it. Take my advice, stay elsewhere." Now, buried in that review is something that, at the time, might have seemed like just another backpacker complaint, but in retrospect, feels far more sinister. Next day, you'll probably be sick like everyone else in the toilet, or you might not make it there. Sure, bad hostel drinks can lead to brutal hangovers, but what if this wasn't just a hangover? Unfortunately, finding concrete information about what really happened at Nana Backpacker Hostel is difficult. Laos is a one-party communist state, meaning there is no free press, no organized opposition, and very little transparency when it comes to government investigations. But here is what we do know. On the evening of November 11, 2024, Nana Backpacker Hostel was buzzing. It was happy hour, and the free shots of Laotian vodka were flowing. The hostel was packed. Travelers drinking, dancing, swapping travel stories, and making plans for the night. Some were gearing up for a night out, while others planned to turn in early for the next day's adventures. Among them were Simone and Bethany, who joined in on the free drinks, each taking 6 shots. Bethany later recalled watching the bartender pour them, never suspecting anything was wrong. By morning, they felt drained, but not in the way you'd expect after a night of drinking. It wasn't just exhaustion. Bethany described it as, "You just can't physically move. You're more or less paralyzed. You can still walk, but everything is much, much, much more difficult than it would be ordinarily." Then, things got worse. Bethany became severely nauseous, struggled with extreme fatigue, and eventually fainted. Other travelers, realizing the severity of their condition, decided to take them to the hospital themselves after waiting an hour for an ambulance that never arrived. On the way, Simone's condition rapidly deteriorated. She began having seizures and lost the ability to breathe on her own. At 2 a.m., Simone's mother was woken up by a call from the hospital. On the other line was Bethany, telling her, "You need to give consent for brain surgery, or basically, Simone's not going to make it." Sue immediately flew to Laos, arriving at her daughter's bedside as she lay on life support. For 3 days, she sat with her, grieving at the sight of her daughter's long blonde hair shaved for the operation. But the ordeal wasn't over. The doctors refused to turn off life support due to their religious beliefs, leaving Sue with the unthinkable task of doing it herself. On November 21st, she removed the tube from her dying daughter's mouth, making the heartbreaking decision to end Simone's suffering. Bethany survived, but was left grappling with the guilt of being the one who lived. She said, "I think we've just had to try and get through the funeral. Obviously, we want to spread awareness and make sure other people don't have to go through this. And then I can start my own journey of trying to come to terms with it all." But Simone and Bethany weren't the only ones who fell ill that night. Bianca and Holly had also taken part in happy hour before heading out to explore the nightlife. By November 12th, they began experiencing severe symptoms: vomiting, dizziness, rapid deterioration. Recognizing the danger, they sought medical help and were transferred to a hospital in Vientiane. Holly's doctor later described how quickly things spiraled. Within 30 minutes, she went from drowsy and confused to comatose. Then she suffered a seizure. Her condition was so critical, she was transported to another hospital in Thailand for treatment. Despite all medical efforts, Bianca passed away on November 21st. Her doctors had warned her parents that her brain was severely swollen, and as her condition worsened, they determined she was brain dead. Her parents made the painful decision to take her off life support and say their final goodbye. The next day, November 22nd, Holly died. Like Bianca's family, her parents received the devastating news that she had no chance of recovery. They, too, made the heartbreaking decision to let her go. Meanwhile, Anne Sophie and Freya had also unknowingly consumed the toxic drinks. They didn't realize how dire their situation was until it was too late. On November 13th, one of the women texted a friend they were traveling with, saying, "I have never been so sick before." She told him they'd been vomiting blood for hours. The friend, who was on his way to Vang Vieng, became so alarmed that he decided to arrive a day early to check on them. But by the time he got there on November 14th, the women had stopped responding to messages, and he didn't even know the name of their hostel. Desperate, he asked around town. Eventually, he heard rumors about a sick girl at Nana Backpacker Hostel. When he arrived, the staff told him the Danish women had checked out the day before and that one of them had gone to Vientiane. But something about that didn't add up. The girls wouldn't have traveled alone. Finally, through other travelers, he learned the truth. After drinking on the 11th, both women had woken up feeling sick. One managed to go to breakfast, but the other was too ill to leave her bed. By the evening of November 13th, hostel staff found them unconscious on the bathroom floor. They had been vomiting blood for 13 hours. Even as their condition worsened, staff refused to call an ambulance. Instead, a female worker bizarrely tried to help by massaging the feet of one of the women while she was having a seizure. It wasn't until someone called a taxi that they were finally taken to a hospital in Vientiane, but it was too late. Both died of heart failure that same night. And then there was James Hudson. James had been traveling through Laos, soaking in the country's stunning landscapes. At some point, he joined the others in drinking that night. No one thought anything of it, just another backpacker enjoying the party. But on November 13th, staff at Nana Backpacker grew concerned when James hadn't left his room all day. He had been staying there since October 20th, long enough for them to know his routine. When they finally checked on him, they found him lifeless in his bed. Scattered around him were several empty bottles of beer and vodka. It was immediately clear to authorities. James had died from consuming the same tainted alcohol. The deaths of multiple travelers after drinking at Nana Backpacker raises a chilling question. Was this a tragic accident, or could there be something more sinister at play? While officials have released little information, theories surrounding the poisonings range from negligence to organized crime and even murder. One of the most common explanations for methanol poisoning in Southeast Asia is the use of tainted or counterfeit alcohol. Methanol, a toxic form of alcohol, is sometimes present in bootleg liquor due to improper distillation or deliberate adulteration. Many budget hostels and bars in backpacker-heavy areas cut costs by sourcing cheap, unregulated alcohol, sometimes even making their own. It's possible that Nana Backpacker Hostel purchased a bad batch of homemade or illegally distributed liquor. The hostel had a reputation for offering free shots during happy hour, which could explain why multiple people were poisoned at the same time. But here's the terrifying part. Methanol poisoning doesn't always show symptoms right away. Sometimes victims don't feel the full effects until 24 or 48 hours later, meaning many of these travelers might not have realized how much danger they were in until it was too late. Was this just a case of a hostel trying to cut corners with cheap alcohol? Or did someone knowingly serve poisoned drinks? The hostel manager, Duong Duc Tuan, and his bartender, Tuan Vang Vieng, denied there was methanol in the drinks. Tuan said he bought the alcohol from a licensed seller and that the free shots, supposedly Lao Tiger vodka, mixed with ice and Coke Zero, were given to 100 people. He insisted that no other guests reported being ill, and even took a shot in front of the police to prove the alcohol was safe. But when authorities tested the alcohol, they discovered the presence of methanol, a highly toxic substance that can cause blindness, organ failure, and death. Unlike regular alcohol, methanol doesn't just give you a hangover. It shuts down your body, slowly and painfully. The thing is, methanol poisoning doesn't happen by accident. It's either extreme negligence or something far worse, deliberate poisoning. In some parts of the world, bootleg alcohol producers add methanol to drinks to stretch profits. But that raises the question, why did this batch only affect tourists? If the same alcohol was being served across the hostel, why weren't locals also falling ill? Could this have been a targeted attack? Perhaps a disgruntled employee, a guest with a grudge, or even a local criminal operation testing their product on unsuspecting foreigners. Not everyone who drank that night became sick. Were specific drinks laced with methanol? And if so, why? Methanol poisoning is a particularly cruel way to kill. It mimics severe intoxication at first, and because so many cases of methanol poisoning are written off as bad alcohol, it's the perfect cover for someone who wants to commit murder without drawing suspicion. If this was intentional, who had the most to gain? Once the deaths made headlines, Laotian authorities acted quickly, almost too quickly. They arrested 11 hostile employees, including the manager, shut down the factory that produced the alcohol, and banned Tiger vodka and Tiger whiskey, the suspected sources of the poison. But then, nothing. The staff members were all released, and no one was convicted. 6 people were dead, yet no one was held accountable. Was this justice or a cover-up? If organized crime or illegal alcohol smuggling was involved, would officials want to bury the truth? Laos is a country with strict government control, limited free press, and a history of keeping tourism-related scandals quiet. Negative publicity could damage the country's backpacker economy. So were local authorities pressured to keep the details hidden? Maybe they know more than they let on. There were also disturbing reports that hostel staff downplayed guest symptoms, delayed calling for help, and even refused to call an ambulance for the Danish women, who were found vomiting blood. But why? Were they afraid of legal repercussions, or were they following orders to keep the incident quiet? And then there's James Hudson. He had been staying at the hostel for weeks and was found dead in his bed, surrounded by empty bottles. His death was quickly attributed to alcohol poisoning. But was it a coincidence? Or did he see something he wasn't supposed to? Counterfeit alcohol is a billion-dollar industry, and in many parts of the world, organized crime groups control its production and distribution. Laos has a history of underground alcohol operations, with bootleggers producing unregulated liquor and selling it cheaply to bars, clubs, and hostels. If Nana Backpacker Hostel unknowingly purchased alcohol from one of these suppliers, it's possible they were sold a tainted batch. But here's the kicker. Some criminal organizations intentionally add methanol to their alcohol supply to increase profits. Methanol is cheaper to produce than ethanol, which is the safe type of alcohol, and when mixed in small amounts, it's hard to detect. Could this have been part of a larger illicit operation where corners were cut and travelers paid the price? At the end of the day, we're left with more questions than answers. Where did the tainted alcohol come from? Did any staff members know the alcohol was dangerous? Why was there such a delay in getting medical help for some of the victims? Were there other cases of illnesses that went unreported? Could this have been an intentional act by someone with a hidden motive? The deaths at Nana Backpacker Hostel remain shrouded in mystery. But one thing is clear. Whether through negligence, criminal activity, or something even darker, these travelers never should have lost their lives. Methanol poisoning is a silent killer. It looks like regular alcohol, but it can blind you, shut down your organs, and kill you. And the scariest part, you might not even realize you've been poisoned until it's too late. So how do you protect yourself? How do you make sure that the next drink you take isn't your last? In many parts of the world, especially Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Eastern Europe, counterfeit or homemade alcohol is a huge industry. Some bars, hostels, and street vendors cut costs by buying cheap, unregulated liquor or even making their own. The problem? Sometimes that homemade liquor isn't just ethanol, it's laced with methanol. And here's the disturbing part. You won't necessarily taste the difference. So, how do you avoid it? Rule number 1, be suspicious of dirt cheap alcohol. If a bar or hostel is giving free shots or selling cocktails at a price that seems too good to be true, there's probably a reason. Stick to well-known brands, sealed bottles, and bars that have a good reputation. Rule number 2, inspect your drink. If the bottle has a weird label, a broken seal, or looks like it's been tampered with, don't risk it. Some fake alcohol has a strong chemical smell, like paint thinner or nail polish remover. If it burns more than usual or tastes off, stop drinking it immediately. Rule number 3, stick to beer, wine, or pre-mixed cans. Methanol is most commonly found in hard liquor. Beer and wine are far less likely to be tampered with, and pre-mixed cans from reputable brands are usually safe. But what if you or someone you're with starts to feel sick? The symptoms of methanol poisoning can take 24 to 48 hours to kick in. At first, it might feel like a regular hangover, headache, dizziness, nausea, but then it gets worse. Vision problems, confusion, trouble breathing, and eventually the body shuts down completely. If you even suspect methanol poisoning, get medical help immediately. And here's something wild. One of the early treatments for methanol poisoning is actually ethanol. Yep, drinking safe alcohol. Drinking more regular alcohol can help slow down the body's metabolism of methanol. The reason is that methanol itself isn't the problem, it's what the body does with it. When methanol breaks down, it turns into formaldehyde. Yes, the stuff used to embalm bodies, and formic acid, which kills cells and then leads to organ failure. But if you introduce ethanol into the system, the body will prioritize metabolizing that instead, giving doctors more time to treat the poisoning. Of course, that isn't a cure. The real treatments are fomepizole, an expensive antidote, and dialysis, which filters the poison out of your blood. But in some parts of the world, there's another issue. Some doctors refuse to administer ethanol due to personal or religious beliefs. In Indonesia, for example, they issued a religious ruling in 2018 saying ethanol could be used in life or death situations. But at the end of the day, it's up to the individual doctor. So if you're in a country where alcohol is restricted, you need to advocate for yourself or whoever is affected and push for alternative treatments like dialysis if ethanol is refused. The bottom line is that methanol poisoning is preventable. Research your destination, watch what you drink, and look out for fellow travelers. And if something feels off, trust your gut. Because in places where bootleg alcohol is common, one bad drink could be your last. And like I always say, no matter where you're traveling, make sure you inform someone about your plans before going anywhere. Tell someone reliable where you're going, what you'll be doing, and when to expect you back. And my number one tip to staying alive on vacation is to pay attention to your gut. If something doesn't feel right, it isn't. The deaths of Simone White, Bianca Jones, Holly Bowles, James Hudson, Anne Sophie Koyman, and Freya Sorensen at Nana Backpacker Hostel remains a disturbing mystery. Was it negligence, organized crime, or something more sinister? With methanol poisoning often dismissed as a tragic accident and no one held accountable, it's hard not to wonder if this case was quietly covered up to protect the local tourism industry. What's clear is that these deaths were preventable. Whether due to reckless cut costing or criminal intent, 6 travelers lost their lives when they should have been safe. Until stronger regulations and real consequences are enforced, tainted alcohol will continue to be a hidden danger. So if there's one takeaway, it's this: stay aware, trust your instincts, and never take your safety or your next drink for granted. And finally, please remember to leave a review and rate this podcast 5 stars if you like the show, or hell, even if you don't. But either way, feel free to let me know what you think. Please follow The Last Trip on Instagram at The Last Trip Crime Pod and subscribe on Patreon to support the show. You'll get extra research, videos, photos, and updates, and even learn more about my personal travels. That's patreon.com/thelasttrippodcast. I'm Jamie Beebe, bringing you your last trip and signing off until the next one. Thanks for listening.